On May 7, 1915, a single torpedo, just one, slammed into the side of the world's most famous passenger liner. What happened next was 18 minutes of absolute chaos. 18 minutes that didn't just claim nearly 1,200 lives, but that also echoed through the halls of power, helping to drag a very reluctant nation into the biggest war the world had ever seen. This is the story of that ship.
It's a heck of a question, isn't it? But for the RMS Lusitania, this isn't some hypothetical. The attack on this ship, this unarmed passenger ship, sent shockwaves around the globe. It became a huge turning point in the First World War, flipping American public opinion hard against Germany, and really setting the stage for the U.S. to jump into the fight.
All right, so let's set the scene. By 1915, Europe is just locked in this brutal, grinding stalemate. But you know, the war wasn't just being fought in the muddy trenches. A whole other war, a desperate battle, was raging on the high seas. It was a battle of strategy, starvation, and a terrifying new weapon.
So you've got this insane, deadly chess match playing out across the Atlantic. On one side, you have Britain's Royal Navy, throwing up this massive blockade, basically trying to starve Germany out of the war. And on the other side, Germany unleashes its brand new weapon, the U-boats, submarines. They declare the waters around Britain a war zone and say, we will sink any Allied ship we find. And it's right into this deadly standoff that the Lusitania is about to sail.
You know, this wasn't some secret threat whispered in the dark. On the very day the Lusitania was scheduled to leave New York, this exact warning from the German embassy was printed in American newspapers. And get this, in some papers it was printed right next to the advertisement for the voyage. I mean, it was a crystal clear message. But for so many people, the danger it didn't feel real.
So with that really stark warning just hanging in the air, let's talk about this ship itself. The Lusitania was an absolute marvel of its time, a true symbol of British pride. It was fast, capable of a blistering 26 knots. But on its final trip across the Atlantic, all of that luxury and opulence was shadowed by this unspoken feeling of dread.
Just look at this sequence of events. The departure's delayed. Once they're in the war zone, the captain, William Turner, he does take some precautions, but he also makes a series of, well, fateful choices. He slows down in the fog. He gets a warning about submarines, and what does he do? He steers closer to the Irish coast, thinking the U-boats are further out at sea. And then, the final piece. At 1:45 p.m., he steadies the course, making his huge ship a predictable, straight-line target.
It's the atmosphere of denial here that is just so striking. Captain Turner actually called the U-boat threat the greatest joke because he was so confident his ship was just too fast to be caught. Meanwhile, some of the rich and famous passengers got these anonymous telegrams warning them not to go, but they just blew them off as pranks. So on board, you've got this picture of total luxury as usual, a completely different world from the German submarine U-20, which was right there actively hunting in those very same waters.
And so, right there, off the coast of Ireland, the path of this giant ocean liner and the silent hunter below, they finally crossed. The stage was set for a catastrophe that was about to unfold with absolutely terrifying speed. At 2:10 in the afternoon, it happened. The U-20's commander, Schweiger, fired a single torpedo. It slammed into the Lusitania on the starboard side, right behind the bridge. The first impact was just violent. It shook the entire 787-foot ship and threw a massive column of water and debris high into the air. But what happened next is what truly sealed the ship's fate.
Now this is fascinating because this quote comes directly from the man who fired the torpedo. Schweiger himself wrote in his war diary that there was a second, much bigger explosion that ripped through the ship from the inside. This wasn't another torpedo. It was something inside the Lusitania that blew up. The ship immediately started listing so badly that it became almost impossible to launch the lifeboats. The decks just turned into total chaos. 18 minutes. That's it. That's less time than your average lunch break. In just 18 minutes, this massive ship plunged beneath the waves. Of the 1,959 people on board, 1,195 died, including 128 Americans. Only 6 lifeboats were successfully launched out of 48. The very first rescuers to arrive were just local Irish fishermen in their small boats, pulling the few hundred survivors they could from the freezing Atlantic.
The sinking caused immediate global outrage. The Allies called it a barbaric attack on innocent civilians, but Germany had a swift and defiant Answer. An answer that kicked off a controversy that has been raging for over 100 years. And this right here is the question at the very heart of this whole disaster. Was this ship just an innocent passenger liner, or was it something more? Germany's entire justification, their whole argument, rested on what they claimed was hiding in the ship's cargo hold.
So right away, you had two completely different stories being told. Germany insisted the Lusitania was basically a warship in disguise, carrying weapons to kill German soldiers. Britain and the U.S. painted it as pure mass murder, an attack on innocent men, women, and children. And for decades, the real truth was murky, buried under layers of wartime propaganda and secrets. But now, today, thanks to deep-sea dives on the wreck and records that have been uncovered, we know the truth. And this table lays out the hard evidence. The Lusitania was carrying over 4 million rounds of rifle ammo, thousands of artillery shells and fuses, and, this is the big one, a large, undeclared shipment of gun cotton, which is a highly volatile explosive. The evidence is pretty clear. Germany's claims were, in fact, accurate. Under the rules of war at the time, the Lusitania was a legitimate military target.
So, okay, beyond the absolute tragedy and all the controversy, what's the real legacy of those 18 minutes? Well, the sinking of the Lusitania sent ripples across the world that completely changed the course of the 20th century.
The key thing to understand is that while the sinking didn't immediately make the U.S. declare war, it was the big turning point for the public. The image of drowned American civilians became this incredibly powerful symbol in propaganda posters and newsreels, paving the way for war 2 years later. The disaster also forced major changes in maritime law. And today, the wreck itself is a protected site, a silent monument resting on the ocean floor.
When you get right down to it, the story of the Lusitania is one of just immense tragedy, but it's also one of really complex truths. It reminds us all that in wartime, those lines between civilian and combatant can get terrifyingly blurry. It was a floating palace and a munitions carrier, a symbol of peace and an instrument of war. And its story is a chilling lesson in how fast a single event can change absolutely everything.